I've read the comments, I've seen the reviews, but are these Kali IN-8 studio monitors really worth the hype? Hi folks, I'm Mike, and I hope you're well. My YouTuber buddies have been saying both publicly and privately to me how much they love Kali's studio monitors, but up until now I haven't had a chance to test them for myself. Now, given that Black Friday is soon coming up, I thought it would be a great time for me to reach out to Kali and say, hey, you need to send me some of these to test. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about what makes these monitors special in their class, why I think people love them so much, and in the interest of balance, we're also going to discuss why these may not be the studio monitors for you. But before we get into that, I think it's really important we discuss what I'm comparing them to. For context, over the last couple of years, my main studio monitors have been the Adam Audio A7Vs, monitors that literally cost twice the price of these Kali IN-8 second wave monitors. Now, you may be thinking that because the Adams are twice the price, they must simply be better, right? Well, it's not quite as simple as that, because although superficially they may seem similar, they've actually got quite a different design. And it could be said that the very design of these Kali IN-8s is actually better in some ways. Now, to really delve into this, I think we need to talk about the specs. Most monitors in this class have two drivers, and on first look you may think these are the same, but in fact these are three-way monitors. At the bottom, we've got an 8-inch woofer. Then above that, we see a 4-inch mid-range driver. But in fact, in the middle of that, we also have a 1-inch tweeter. Now, this is something called a coaxial design, and we're going to discuss the advantages of that a little bit later on. Now, each of these drivers has its own amplifier. So the woofer has a 60-watt amplifier, and the mid-range and tweeter also have a 40-watt amplifier each, giving a total power of 140 watts. Now, while we're looking at the front, it's worth mentioning that these monitors are front ported, and depending on your listening situation, that may be a great advantage. But before we get into all of that, we also need to look at the back. On the back, we see three choices of connector to hook you up to your audio interface. We have an RCA connection, a 1/4-inch TRS, and an XLR connection. Now, I'd recommend whenever you can make use of either the TRS or the XLR, because these are balanced connections and you're going to get a cleaner signal. Now, next to these, we see a whole bunch of dip switches, and above that, some diagrams instructing you on how to use them. Now, these relate to the onboard digital signal processing, the DSP, which enables you to make adjustments to your monitors depending on a few things like where they're situated. Are they on stands or on your desk? How far away are they from a wall? You can also do some broad EQ adjustments here as well. So this is great and doesn't appear on all monitors in this class, and gives you the ability to sort of tailor your monitors to your particular situation. So I think you probably already understand why most studio monitors have at least two drivers. One driver to take care of some lower frequencies and the other driver to take care of the higher frequencies, each dedicated to that task. So it kind of makes sense that a three-way monitor would be better. Again, each of its drivers focusing on its own frequency range with less chance for things like distortion. But it comes with its own set of problems. If we lay out those three drivers separately physically from each other, especially in the mid and upper ranges, we're going to get a problem with some of the shared frequencies of those drivers reaching our ears at different times, because they're a different distance from our ears. This causes phase issues, and to put it short, it just makes it more difficult for you to make informed decisions with those particular frequencies. And that's why they've used this coaxial design. The mid-range and the tweeter are in the same physical location, so their sound is going to be reaching your ears at the same time. This kind of gives these monitors an unfair advantage, if you like, over some more expensive monitors which are two-way. Now I quickly want to mention something about the quality of the amplifiers. Sometimes with monitors in this price range you can get some slightly noisy amplifiers, and it'll often show up in the higher frequencies where you'll hear a kind of a hiss coming from the tweeters. Now I've read and heard about the previous generation of these monitors that was sometimes the case for people and they found it a little bit annoying. But I can definitely say it must have been something they improved immensely with this generation, because I haven't heard or noticed any noise while I've been sitting in silence with these monitors at all. So if you hear someone saying, oh, I've heard Kali monitors but they're a little bit noisy, then they're probably talking about the previous generation. Okay, so theories about design and specs is one thing, but what's been my actual experience with these monitors? Well, as I mentioned earlier, my point of reference has been my Adam audio monitors. Now I must say those Adams sounded a little bit harsh in the mid-range when I first got them. I've got used to them now, but some people really don't like those monitors for that reason. And you're going to have quite a different experience with these Kali monitors. They're much smoother in that way, and at the same time you still get plenty of detail in those mid and high frequencies. And I think they've been able to achieve that because of their three-way design. And as I mentioned earlier, because they're using this coaxial system, they're able to compensate for any phase issues you might get in a three-way design. So I'm loving the mids and highs. Now moving on to the woofer, this extends nice and low. It's an 8-inch woofer, and for the vast majority of you, I have to say you shouldn't be thinking about a subwoofer with these monitors unless you're often mixing music which uses, you know, those sub frequencies, and you're in a listening environment where you can actually hear those frequencies accurately, which most of us are probably not, to be honest with you. But in terms of the quality of the low end in these monitors, I've actually really enjoyed them. They've got a nice response to them, so I'm not just hearing those low frequencies, I'm able to make decisions about them. Now I always try, you know, other different monitors and, you know, headphones and things as well as a part of my process, but I can get most of it done using these monitors in terms of the lows, mids and the highs. So overall I've really enjoyed these monitors, and I can see why people have got so excited about them. But I don't think they're for everyone. So one thing I would say about these monitors is that if you're working in a pretty small space, then these are probably not the monitors for you. In fact, 8-inch monitors in general are probably not ideal in a small space. We all have issues in terms of dealing with low frequency responses in our rooms, no matter what the size, but it's especially difficult to deal with in a small space. And any advantages that you get with that low end extension are going to be sort of eradicated by the fact that you won't really be able to make any proper judgments about those low frequencies in a small space. Now I'm going to put a link for these monitors in the description down below, but I'm also going to put a link for their little brothers. There's some 5-inch versions of these. I believe that the mid-range and the tweeters are actually identical, but they have a smaller woofer. So if you're working in a small space and you like the sound of these monitors, then I would recommend you take a look at those 5-inch versions. Now, another thing that we need to mention about working in a small space is the fact you're probably going to be forced to have your monitors close to a wall. And that's another problem that can occur with sort of low frequencies especially. So one good thing about these monitors, and it's true of the 5-inch versions, is that they are front ported. You don't want to have rear ported monitors if you're going to have your monitors close to a rear wall. So My recommendation, if you're in a really small space, take a look at the smaller versions and avoid any monitors that are rear ported. Now, while we're talking about rooms and things, I'd like to talk about setup, because the setup of your monitors can really help you to get the most out of them. Now, these monitors can be used on a desktop. Now, I will say that they're pretty big for many desktops, but they could be used there. However, I would suggest personally that if you can, and if you've got space, get them on their own separate stands. This helps to decouple them from the desk and kind of takes the desk a little bit out of the equation in terms of your room acoustics. So that's a really important thing to do if you can. Now, the other thing that you need to think about is the distance of these monitors from your ears. So it's recommended that they be at least ½ meter from you, up to 4 meters. And while we're talking about distance, make sure they're an equal distance from you. You don't want one monitor to be further to the left, for example. You want them to be an equal distance so that you can make good decisions about panning and to avoid any kind of phase issues you might get as well. Now, talking about panning, it's best, if you can, to create an equilateral triangle between yourself and your 2 monitors. If you do that, then you can really optimize your decisions, especially in terms of the stereo imaging. So as close to that as you can possibly get in your situation. Now, finally, whenever we're talking about upgrading monitors at all, or buying your first studio monitors, you need to think about room treatment. If you're currently sitting in a room with bare walls all around you, I would suggest that that's a much more important thing to think about before you think about upgrading your monitors. Now, you don't have to go too crazy on this. You could start off, for example, just by making sure there's lots of soft furnishings, bookcases and things around as well, things that can diffuse the sound, so you haven't got sound bouncing just from one bare wall to another. Another step up from that might be some DIY solutions for room treatment, or you might purchase some room treatment, and if you go the whole hog, you can spend many thousands on getting an expert in to treat your room, which you're probably not going to do with monitors in this kind of class. But don't think that having better monitors in a bare room is going to help you that much at all. So do they live up to the hype? Well, of course they do. There's no real surprise there, but I'm glad that I've got to try them in person. How they've done it, I think, is down to some good design decisions. Now, it's amazing that they get to do that in that price range, considering there's an extra amplifier, extra drivers, etc. But they have done it somehow, and it doesn't seem to be at the sacrifice of the quality of the materials or anything like that. These feel like nice, solid monitors. So definitely I can recommend them. Let me know if you've heard them and what you feel about them in the comments down below. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next video.